Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second First Pages critique. That we all know it's more than just the first page. It's usually more like three to five, and I'm really excited this time to be joined by a friend of mine, Emily Wibberley, because I found that I did not like doing this by myself. So I'm really excited. You're gonna get my thoughts, but also Emily's thoughts on these pages. And it'll be easier for me to scan comments because another person will be here to talk. And you can ask her questions as well when we do kind of Q&A toward the end. She writes YA rom-coms, though I should let you properly introduce yourself, Emily.
I am one half of a writing duo. I write with my husband, and we write YA contemporary rom-coms. Our debut was Always Never Yours. It's a Romeo and Juliet retelling. And then we had If I'm Being Honest, which is The Taming of the Shrew meets Mean Girls. And then most recently, Time of Our Lives, which is like a college road trip book about college touring.
And your next one?
And our next one is academic overachievers, enemies to lovers trying to get into Harvard.
And your adult.
I sold an adult book, which is extremely, if you have questions about how it is to write with your husband, I recommend you read our adult book coming out in 2022 called The Roughest Draft, about co-authors who may have some unresolved feelings for each other.
But yours are resolved because you're married.
Yes.
So the irony, like I already said this to you, but I'll say it for the audience. I realized, we should do some romance or rom-com pages. And there is one, but I realized I exhausted most of the ones you guys submitted last time. Ironically, I had already kind of picked a couple. But I did try to do a slightly better mix, but we are limiting ourselves to 5 first pages because I am very long-winded. You guys know this. And the last stream was very long. So this is so that we can like hone in on those 5, but I tried to really vary the genres. There's 2 adult, 2 YA, and a middle grade. And yeah, I think we should just dive in. Screen sharing should also go better this time, guys, because I learned from our last stream. So let's get this going. Because I loaded this into a Chrome tab. So everything's better now. Yay. All right. So the first one is by Sai. It is an adult fantasy. The title is Let the River Run. And I just want to say that because of this title, I watched Working Girl this week because the Carly Simon song comes into my head every single time. Could be a good or a bad thing, but... like I just keep hearing it in my head. I'm like, yeah, let's jam out.
Yeah.
So just like last time, actually better than last time, I'm going to make an effort to read as much as possible in case you have trouble reading on screen, etc. So the tires of a mint green SUV sent flecks of gravel flying as the rusty vehicle turned into the driveway. All turns were wide and jerky with Autumn's father at the wheel. Something screeched when the shifter shifted into the parked position. In the front passenger seat, Autumn's mother, Laura, flinched. So the notes, my opening note was actually that the spacing was really funky on this, and just a note to the writer to fix that. I think that all of these paragraphs were hard returned. You don't need to do that. I've actually manually fixed it for the purposes of going through this, but you're going to want to fix that for your manuscript formatting. And then you're also going to want to indent the first paragraph. Of every line of every first paragraph. That's just a little kind of technical thing. And my thing here, the shifter shifted, something about that just really like maybe tilt my head. There has to be more eloquent, but also specific way to say that. A verb that isn't the same as the thing. Be careful, she said, gripping the emergency handle above the door with both hands. Laura, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, so I would say
Laura, Emily.
The character is Laura.
Well, the character is Laura.
Like a first line of dialogue is our first window into a character. And so like this is interesting because I get the sense that this is a child. I'm not sure, I didn't read the like pitch. So I think Alexa has said somewhere later on that it is a 10-year-old. And this is an opportunity to maybe get some of that across because it's unusual for a child to be telling their parent to be careful while driving. So that it tells you a little bit about our character, but you could go more into it. Like, what does that mean? Is this a character who is nervous, who feels like the parent in the relationship? Like, expand on the interiority here so that we really like learn. This is an opportunity to like get us into character on the second paragraph, which is like huge and something we should all be trying to do. And you have an interesting line here. It makes me wonder.
Yeah. So here, I changed this because I marked it as wordy awkward, because we already know that there are 3 characters here, so you don't always have to use the names. The original was Autumn's father's reply. It was also kind of the double possessive. I changed it just to his reply was drowned out by a mechanical grating sound of some unknown origin. I just deleted some. It's just superfluous. It's a little more direct if you skip that. So it'd be sound of unknown origin. Autumn didn't mind. The vinyl seatbelt dug into her neck when she shifted. I noted this as an, well, Emily, see, you're ahead of me. Repetitive word.
So it's on there. Like, and we all do it. We all have words that like we get in kind of a little bit of a funk about. We just use it all the time. So you just want to, especially on the first page, just really comb your like first couple pages for those repetitive words.
And I'm guessing Penguin is really similar to Random House, but Random House nails me on repetitive words.
It's so, and like to the point of being like, you're using too many words that start with un. Like, stop using un words. And
I haven't gotten that yet. So like it seems nitpicky, but like when you get to a publisher, this stuff actually matters, and it's worth just learning the skill ahead of time. Like, if I knew what I know now, I would have worked on this years ago. It really does make your writing stronger to fight against repetitive words, because it forces you to come up with something different and often better. So she shifted for a better look at the house on her right, a thin 2-story structure with pale blue siding and white windowsills. Heavy curtains coated in a thick layer of gray dust prevented Autumn from glimpsing anything of the inside. She climbed out of the van, breathing in the humid air. And this was a grammar thing. Delete the and, hoping for an elusive whiff of impending rain. By the way, I really like the sensory details here. I am so this person. I love the like smell of rain, and I definitely feel a sense of place, which is very good. So here, Autumn unzipped her jacket and tossed it back inside the van. I said that it felt non sequitur. I felt a little, it was like a jarring shift here. There was something about this transition that like took me out of something, essentially. Haven't been here in a while, said her father, looking around. No, said her mother, looking straight ahead to the garage at the end of the driveway. We haven't. So my note was that it feels like filler without something to anchor it. And having read on, we know that something is tense between mother and father. I think that's the intention here, but it's not coming across to me. And especially because Autumn is our protagonist and Autumn is a child, there's an opportunity here to see it through her perspective.
Right.
And this is indeed the first time I mentioned that she was 10. So there's something about this here with transition, like it needs something to kind of flesh it out a bit.
Yeah, like, and this is something that comes up a couple times, that it's like, you kind of just maybe get us more into the emotions and the interiority, so it doesn't just feel like things happening so much. So like, I think that's part of that transition feels a little sudden, because we're still kind of wondering what she wants, what she's feeling in this moment. And also the great thing about a book is that if you're trying to get across the information that they haven't been here in a while, you don't actually have to do that in dialogue. And like, you can actually just do that in interiority, and you can have, even, I know this is third person, but you can still have a closer third where you can say like, she hadn't been here in a while, or maybe she hadn't ever been here. I don't know what this 10-year-old's experience is, but you can flesh that out a little bit.
Yeah. All right. Behind the house was a patch of yellowing grass with a large bird feeder mounted on a metal pole at its center. On the edge of the grass, by the tall wooden fence, were 3 ceramic bowls filled with cat food. Autumn paused, searching for any sign of a cat to pet, which is such a 10-year-old. Actually, I do that as an adult, but it's such a 10-year-old thing. I legit, will squeal if I see a cat. Birds attract cats. You feed the birds and they don't eat the cats, said her father with a smile. Autumn, the original is Autumn turned around. I put whipped around because there's like there's a visual in that I wasn't getting from turned. I think whipped around is a lot stronger. This is when I started cleaning up the paragraph. Or I maybe Emily, you're the one that cleaned up these paragraphs.
No.
No, it was me. Okay, it was me. Don't you mean feed the cats and they won't eat the birds, she said. I did an insertion here, somewhat incredulous. Yes, so this is my suggestion to add some stronger verbs to characterize how she was responding. So this in kind of combination with the whipping around, and then it feels more like a, the way that we do when we're kids, we're like, excuse me, like, what are you talking about? Just adding a little flavor, texture, character to this through word choice. Her father shook his head. That's not what your grandpa says. Autumn considered this. What kind of bird is big enough to eat a cat, she said. It's just for context, everyone. I did these notes a few weeks ago. So I'm re-experiencing the manuscript, which is actually really fun. This is a formatting thing. I said, don't be afraid to lock up the dialogue that belongs to the action tag. And Autumn considered this. This is what the paragraph things are. It just doesn't show. Where delete the extra space. Autumn considered this. What kind of bird is big enough to eat a cat? Like, smush that together. Because honestly, if you don't, your publisher will. But yeah, that's something that happens a lot in copy edits and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Hawks and owls and even ostriches, if they have the mind to do it, said Leonard Wintertide in a loud voice as he stepped out of the garage. I marked this as an opportunity for stronger description. Loud, what kind of loud? Is it gravelly? Is it jolly? Though that's going to make me think of Santa, but you know what I mean. How can you characterize this character by using some stronger choices here? I've never seen an ostrich around here, said Autumn, laughing. And I marked this as an opportunity where you don't always have to have a dialogue tag. This could be an interesting place to have an action tag, like to really ground us in the sense of place in the action. What is Autumn doing? And especially because this is an interaction with grandfather, what can you give me that connects me spatially to the scene? I'm a fan of that personally.
And I would add to that too, like just looking at this is something that my co-writer / husband, he does not like to look at a page that has more than 3 or 4 lines of just like one line dialogue. Like you want to like see some meaty paragraphs. You want to have some variety in the number of lines on each paragraph. Like, I know it sounds like a silly arbitrary rule, but it just like makes it read like a book. So like I will see that, and that's a lot of one-line paragraphs. That's an opportunity, and like Alexa's saying, describe what they're doing, what they're seeing, what they're feeling, how they're saying things, like their facial expressions, and it'll just like feel like a book.
You're so smart. That's why we're friends. Yes, absolutely. And I've talked about it before in videos, to think about the physical reading experience. I've talked about it in the opposite. Like if you have really long paragraphs that aren't broken up, that can actually trip up your reader, but so can really short sentences. Break. It's a stilted reading experience. So, have you seen a hawk or an owl? No, said Autumn, who had never seen anything larger than a crow flying about, which is a great example of interiority. More of that. Then who's to say there are no ostriches just because you haven't seen one yet? Yes. So same note. Well, said Autumn. This is where I had a note to pull back on the dialogue tags. It's a little bit heavy on dialogue tags. And I know that I tell y'all, you said when in doubt, yes, but not all the time. That doesn't mean replace it with, gestured Autumn wildly would be an action tag. But it doesn't mean replace it with Autumn hissed or Autumn whispered. Like, don't use the fanficky dialogue tags, but you don't have to say said so-and-so on every single line of dialogue.
It's like she frowned. Just something that like, we know whose paragraph this is, but we don't need to say said again.
Exactly. So this is my note. Now I see apparently Grandpa's been moving across the lawn, because now we get when he reached Autumn, he scooped her up beneath armpits and twirled her around while she laughed. Autumn turned her face to the sky, watching the clouds turn to fluffy spirals in her dizzy vision. When her grandfather set her down, Autumn collapsed on the grass. She lay still as the world around her continued to spin. So think about tracking these characters in the previous interaction. So when we get here, there's like a logical spatial flow. And then Emily, you want to jump in here?
Yes. So I've kind of said this a little bit already, but like just throughout, sprinkle in more emotional descriptions, which will help build a sense of like suspense. And also if you have like, what is she feeling as she arrives to this house? Is she excited? Is she scared? Like, is she anxious? What is she feeling? And then what does she feel when she gets there? And I hope that those feelings are different feelings, because scenes should have changes in them and they should have emotional shifts. And it'll just like add a little, I don't know, it's exciting as a reader when you're like, oh, the reader,
it's tension.
The character didn't expect this. Like, what is going on? And so it'll add conflict when like really there's not any actual conflict. It'll just feel like conflict. And so just throughout, little check in with her character and like, what are we thinking? What are we feeling?
Well, especially I've read to the end of the sample, which is cheating and spoilers, because it's not all here and not everyone's going to get to read it. But this is a preamble, and it's a good preamble. I think this starts in the right place. And a lot of manuscripts we talk about starting in the wrong place. This is a preamble to a massive escalation in the next section. Like, there should be slow building tension and clues. The writer knows what's to come. I don't want to spoil their book, but let's just say something very bad happens in the next section. I want it threaded through this whole section, while of course still being anchored in Autumn's POV, and generally building up the POV of her as a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
But of course, it is adult, so it's still it shouldn't feel like a middle grade. So that's kind of the delicate balance of it, because it is still an adult novel. She's just a 10-year-old protagonist. So we have some more. Oh, this was another example of locking it up. You don't need the paragraph break here. It can be, "To what do I owe the pleasure of this surprise visit?" said her grandfather. "Despite the heat, he wore a black motorcycle jacket and a Harley-Davidson baseball cap." All one paragraph. Also, I love those details.
Yes, great details.
I know who this person is.
Yeah.
"It's not a surprise," said Laura. "We're here to help clean up around the place." I just cut this because you don't need it. "We're here to clean up, like we talked about on the phone." Autumn sat up in the grass, watching the adults keenly. I added this to ground it in the POV. Originally, it said Autumn sat up in the grass, and I just think about always anchoring it back to the POV, even though it's third person. Like, think about limited POV and how she would see the scene. Her grandfather looked unsure about something, but nodded anyway. Right, he said. Said Laura, unconvinced. "How are you, Leo?" "Right as rain, as always," he said. "Where would you like to start?" I also did another like little edit here. Like, as always, y'all should not feel like you have to take my voice, but these are just examples. They started with the garage is just a little bit flat. And this is another way to, it's also to avoid repetition of start. Yeah. I put the garage apparently, which also is bringing us back to the POV of Autumn.
Yeah.
Autumn, who had been instructed on the ride over to stay out of the way as much as possible, wandered over to the van. On the back seat beside her discarded jacket were several battered paperback novels. Autumn brought at least 2 books with her wherever she went. This is a mood. That way, even if she didn't have time to read them, the books would never feel alone. That is adorable. By the way, this is a great example. Like, I feel a 10-year-old here, and this is great. She picked up the first book on the stack. The Thief of Always was, sorry, that's 2 sentences. She picked up the first book on the stack. The Thief of Always was emblazoned across the cover in blue, the blue cover in shiny blood red letters. Autumn's mother had finished reading the book the night before and passed it on to Autumn that morning over breakfast. This is now a flashback. And again, I'm suggesting you lock this up. No paragraph break. "I think you'll like this," she'd said. Instead of said her mother, she'd said that the past perfect is going to anchor that in the flashback. Setting the book down beside Autumn's bowl of honeycomb cereal. "It's spooky." And then I cut this because I don't think you need any of it. This is just more deep flashback. I honestly only think you need this paragraph. It tells us what we need to know, because I want to move forward in the action of this scene. After a moment's consideration, Autumn plucked a pink Laffy Taffy. This is just branding. It's a brand name, so capitalize it. Wrapper off the floor of the van and slipped it between 2 random pages toward the back of her book. I am honestly a little appalled that she doesn't have a bookmark, but whatever. She returned to the backyard. Along the bottom of the house was a small window looking down into the basement. Well, it would have looked down into the basement if not for the thick layer of black spray paint coating the glass. I agree, Emily.
It's like, oh, okay, I want to keep reading. Like, I didn't expect that. You set up like so much kind of like magical stuff, and then we're getting black spray paint. It's just like, oh, it's an interesting, juxtaposition there.
Yeah. Autumn sat down beside the window and began to read. I'm also just liking the visuals. Like I want more. I did mention that I wanted more at the beginning. I wanted more of a sense of place and spatial relations so that this all builds on it. So I want to really like see everything and see her sitting. My note was, I want to simplify this. This is a little too much for me. There was a window above where Autumn sat as well, covered in a pair of faded floral curtains. This was the kitchen window situated between two sets of brown plastic cabinets and about the stainless steel sink. That there's something there is confusing to me. Simplify. You can just say the kitchen window sat directly above Autumn, etc. You want a little bit of style in the writing, but this is a little meandering for me. Here stood Calpurnia Wintertide, a shaker full of salt clutched in one hand. Her other hand gripped the edge of the sink, keeping her upright as her knees shook. There's something here. I like this tension.
Yeah. It's like these two paragraphs really build really well.
Yeah. And that's another reason why, honestly, I want you to simplify this because like I get here and I'm like, okay, what is this? I'm in.
I have to say, like, the names in this are really, really unique, and they just like fit the tone.
Fantasy, good, but grounded because it's clearly something of the real world. Good, grounded fantasy. Calpurnia was pouring a thick layer of salt along the windowsill when she heard the van pull into the driveway. This is where I put a note that I am not hyper well read in adult fantasy. That is my disclaimer, and I was a little jarred here because it pulled me out of the POV. It's okay to have more than one. I'm going to defer to the writer on that, but I was a little confused.
Yeah, I don't read that type of genre often, but it certainly is one. So like, we're not saying don't do it. Just like read in your genre.
Yeah. But Calpurnia is still very interesting to me, so I'll just finish the section. She had been standing still since then, waiting for the telltale click of the front doorknob turning. It had not come for many minutes now. Calpurnia tapped her bare foot against the cold linoleum floor. She was dressed in the same brown slacks and white blouse she had worn before, having never gone upstairs to bed. I am curious what before is, if that's intentionally vague. Her gray curls hung in limp tangles, almost reaching her shoulders. She replaced the salt shaker in the cabinet before returning to the metal folding chair she had placed beside the kitchen table. On her right was an old radio with an antenna and a dial. She switched it on, filling the dark kitchen with the sound of dead air. So I kind of stopped here because it kept going, and I already teach you guys. So it escalates a lot at the end of the sample, at the end of the 10 pages, and it is a punch to the face. And to that end, I want more about the thread with the parents. I mean, so, her parents are having problems. I want it to feel like a ticking clock. So really think about building the tension, pulling back on some things and doing more of others. My thought was 10 pages, like almost might be too late for the thing that happens. It depends on how taut you can make the previous 9. I might trim a bit with this back and forth at the house because it's all that happens essentially is they go to visit her parents and it's pretty straightforward. What's important is what comes after. So I would just be that's my thought. And poor Emily, I didn't send you the whole sample because I'm a horrible person. So.
I am. It was intriguing, and I would say also just do cue us into how old Laura is up front, because I think it was a good exercise for me to read without context, because that is how some readers are going to be. And I did not. I was like, is this a teenager? Is this like young? Is this middle grade? I did not know. And then when I got to the head bopping and the tone, it was clearly adult. But I didn't get a sense of how old this character was from the beginning. Yeah.
So you're really anchoring the reader in the parents through the child.
Right.
And as I recall, because I read the pitches on all of these, I think it really is Autumn's story. So just kind of that note about the POV shifts. It's not that you can't do it. Maybe there's a mini section break to switch to Calpurnia's POV. I don't know. I will entrust authors of that genre to know what they're doing. All right, so we are going to jump into the next one. This is a YA fantasy retelling by Holly called Snow Red. I will give you just enough of a teaser here, because again, I do know the pitches. It is a YA fantasy retelling of the Snow White, Snow Red story. So it's Snow White is kind of the bad guy in this one. So I was really intrigued by that, which is one of the reasons I picked it to go over. So I'm going to jump right in. Oh, and now we get to test my ability to say Irish names, which is bad. I know it's a different spelling. Rosen, we're going to call her Rosen, and we're going to pretend I got that right. Also, if you hear stray noises, my cats are playing in the background. So sorry. They destructive. Rosen jerked backwards as Madame Salish yanked the brush through her hair. I love that first line, by the way. Why you insist on keeping it this long is a mystery, Madame Salish said. It would be so much more manageable and fashionable at a more reasonable length. Are you trying to embarrass your family? I like this as an opening. I immediately get a sense of character and a sense of conflict. Mm-hmm. Rosen bit her tongue to stop. So this is where I started doing line edits, as you can see. The original was to stop the words, my only family died a month ago, from coming out. And my suggestion is a stronger verb. To stop from blurting, my family died a month ago. It's shorter, it's sweeter, it's basically cut adverbs when you don't need them.
And I highlighted that as well. And I like, it's a nice moment. We get an immediate sense of like where this character is coming from. And I kind of feel her like that she has a bit of an attitude that she wants to blurt this like a tragedy that she's just gonna be like, excuse me, my family died. Like you get a sense of like
mood.
Yeah, and like that's great. It's some character coming through in a very subtle way.
It's very YA as well.
Yes.
But it directly plays into the setup. So I guess I can it doesn't come in the sample. Snow White is her half sister, and she's going to be presented, she's gonna meet her for the first time, and this woman is getting her ready. So what I replaced, so the original was, having spent the last 3 weeks in Madame Salish's company, learning how to not make a complete fool of herself now that she was living at court, she knew from experience that the fight that would cause would get her nowhere. Madame Salish held no love for Rosen's recently deceased mother, and Rosen held no love for the father she barely knew. And I just suggested like a little reframe that is, there was something about this that felt a little wordy to me. I know that's like so like Amadeus, like too many notes. It's just a gut feeling. It's just my opinion. So my suggestion was, she knew it would get her nowhere. Family was her beloved mother, dead at, like, add a little detail, gone at blank. Yeah. Family was not her father, who'd brought her here to court and whom she barely knew. Madame Salish held no love for Rosen's mother anyhow. So this is just an example of a line edit to maybe tighten, to vary the sentences, to add a little bit of punch. That said, I mean, this is my voice, and I know that's a little unfair. So, Rosen winced again as Madame Salish continued brushing. Madame Salish also held no love for Rosen's unfashionably waist-length hair. This has already been stated, so this feels repetitive. She was not one to hold her opinions close to her chest, so I suggest cutting that. So it's Rosen winced again as Madame Salish continued brushing. She bit her lip and stared resolutely at the dull gray wall of her room. I suggested a line edit just for describing this space. This sitting room was comfortable enough, with large plush armchairs that sat beside the fireplace. This is a note for me. I cut the table because I didn't think it was important. I wanted to tighten this description. But this and her bedroom and changing rooms beyond were dank and depressing. All blood red tapestries and shadows upon shadows. She missed the windows and the light of her rooms at Mural. So this is basically combining description, because you're giving us a visual sense with her feelings is the idea, whereas the original was like description followed by feelings. So trying to combine those.
Yeah, it's a good way of getting across interest. Like we're killing two birds with one stone, and so it goes across faster, and nobody notices that you've put in some exposition there.
Yeah, exactly. And God, Madame Salish is such a piece of work. And that color, Madame Salish said, the dialogue does a really great job of characterizing these two. And I put a note here that I would love an action tag here, something to even further personify this character. Like we already know she's tugging the comb through her hair. Is there something else that she does here? It limits what you can wear. If only you had your sister's hair, black and shiny with lovely natural waves and a respectable length. I am curious what a respectable length is. Maybe put some context there or have Rosin reflect on it. I cut this just because this is a little, well, you know, Bob, as was the case with most members of House of Red. Rosin's hair matched the title of her house, House of Red. That's also just kind of a voice thing. So my note here, I don't know why Madame Salish cares. I don't know who she is. And I don't know why Rosin has to put up with her. And that's where, like, I highlighted all of this because it's repeating some of the details. I would really tighten a lot of this. I'm not going to read it over if that's okay, all of it. Because that was my main feeling here. I started skimming just a little bit. I really want this scene to move along.
Yeah.
It's a great setup. And I want to get to the next thing and the next thing. Because I know, again, I've cheated all of you. I cut the sample early. I know that she's headed to the main chambers to meet her sister for the first time. I want you to get us there a little bit faster with a little less backstory while still feeding me important details. This is hard. Let me scroll a bit and then Emily, I feel like I've taken over the comments here. Sorry.
You kind of said it all there, and I came in a little later.
Yeah. So then I highlighted here, this is where I started to get a little lost because it goes into deep backstory right here. And, you know, I gave these, my cat is playing with the box. Hold on. PETA. Well, hopefully you guys can't hear it. I can hear it. It's just annoying me.
It's not bad.
It's my fault for not throwing out the box. It's a cat. What do I expect? Now he's sad. There's some good stuff here, but it's just it's feeling a little bit like I'm getting lost. I don't need more of Salish. I don't need any of this. They had this conversation nearly every day since she'd come to the castle and so on and so forth. I feel like this is all stuff that can be done in a line or two within the action to move along to the next thing, or anything hypercritical can be dropped somewhere else. And also, I have a feeling Salish is not an important enough character for her to dominate the opening pages this much, basically. So, hold on, let me jump ahead. Here, I'll read this since you have a good note here. They're having an argument. I would certainly call being raised in the mountains surrounded by soldiers and ruffians and never once having a proper introduction at court being locked away, Madame Salish said. You turn 18 in a few days' time, and that will be your first introduction at court. Most young men and women are introduced at 15. Why, your sister was introduced at 14. Oh, and how fair she was even back then. The fairest of them all. I really should accompany you tonight and make sure you don't fall back on old habits and embarrass the king.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight this because it's one of those just writing tricks of getting across backstory via an argument. You just are and sometimes it's shouting and sometimes it's just a disagreement, but you didn't have to put this all into a long, deep backstory paragraph. Mm-hmm. You got it across in dialogue, and that is a great trick. And you can make that go longer or whatever, and it just keeps it moving and it keeps you feeling oh, I'm excited. I don't feel like I'm reading backstory because we all know backstory is a thing to get through.
Exactly. So I would tighten the stuff that I've already gone over to get to this. Yeah. I would love this on page 2, 3 at the latest. Right. And this actually can be used to address some of those questions I have. This is where you can give us the context of who Madame Salish is to Rosin. And I would work in here the bit about she's about to meet her half sister who is I believe she's queen or prince. She's important at court for the first time and she's really, really nervous. And I want some of that reflection, and you can work all that in, especially with this woman being oh, she's so gorgeous.
Yeah, right.
And actually, because
How do you feel?
We know this is a retelling as well. Like, this is where the reader, honestly, give them what they want. Like, this is Snow White, but also drip feed them a little bit of the hints of your twist on it, because you are twisting it. So, let's see. Rosin couldn't help but roll her eyes. Meryl also acted as the main northern base for the king's army. The House of Red's lands were large enough that it wasn't a problem, and they were an ideal location with the mountains along the northern edge of their lands, the forest along the eastern side, and Foxhorn River cutting along the western side. Oh, that's a long sentence. I'm so sorry. I'm so bad at reading this. And Foxhorn River cutting along the western side, leading down to Calney Bay at the southernmost reach of Meryl's lands. Actually, to that end, this is a really long and wordy sentence.
That's a long sentence.
And I would trim it.
Yeah.
It tripped me up reading, but it can trip someone up reading out loud. It can trip them up with their eyes as well. It wasn't as if the soldiers stayed in the manor. They have their own base quite a ways from the main grounds, especially because this is her response. Don't have too much before you get there. And then Madame Salish's eyes narrowed. If that's so, then how did you end up getting to be so close to that man?
I'm just like, that's a nice little lean in. I'm like, I want to know. And then I highlighted the next part because I like how she doesn't answer that question.
Yes.
In her dialogue or in her thoughts. Like, it makes you like, okay, I guess I got to keep reading. Like, what's going on with this dude?
And exactly. Rosin sucked in the breath and counted to 10. I'm going to be late, and I would hate to make the king's dinner go cold. Had he wanted you to join him for this dinner as well, I'm sure he would have sent word. I love that clapback. With that, Rosin walked out the door, careful not to slam it behind her as she dearly wanted to. So it comes to a great place, really starting from right here. Get us here faster.
Yeah.
Especially because I know that the next thing is a boy. This is like it's the Aspen from the selection moment. This is a boy that is known to her, but it's a little bit too much backstory for right off the bat. So
you'll see in the next paragraph in the dialogue. So it's like, we don't need to do double. Yes. You either do it in the dialogue or you do it not in the dialogue. And generally, if you can have some fun dialogue, it's something nice when it comes to backstory.
But that said, his name is Rhett. For me, that's a little too Gone with the Wind.
And I'll say, literally, never have I had an editor allow me to have two principal characters with the same first letter of their name. So that's just not a thing.
The thing is, everyone's like, really? And we're like, yeah, they're really anally retentive. But
they're really intense about that. So, one of the names. Our age.
They have their reasons. So I will read this down to the end. Rhett was leaning against the stone wall outside her door in his official uniform as her personal guard. Actually, another note here to orient us in that very first scene, especially with Madame Salish, to how court works and who everyone is. Like, is that her lady in waiting? Is she her governess or her babysitter? And then interesting here that she has a personal guard. That's an interesting note, an interesting detail. He had been a soldier and had been stationed at Meryl. He was 5 years older than her, and they had met when she was 14. This is where it's a little, the backstory we don't need yet. When he had first been stationed at Meryl, they had gotten along well despite their age difference, and he had quickly grown to be both her best friend and something like what she imagined an older brother would be. When her mother had died and the king sent word that he wanted his illegitimate daughter to join him at court, that's an interesting detail. She had been told she could pick someone to be her personal guard, or she could have one assigned to her. She had picked Rhett and had been so grateful when he had accepted. She couldn't imagine how much more homesick she would be if he wasn't here with her. I think you could accomplish this with the dialogue exchange.
Right. And also, you can cut, if you were to not, you could cut it, she picked Rhett. Like, you don't need to do that ending part. Like, it's kind of snappy. Like, oh, she picked Rhett. Like, it makes it fill in that blank a little bit.
Yeah, but I'm even envisioning, because I like ribbing, like, does he say something and she teases him and she's like, well, you're lucky I picked you to be my personal guard. And they are playful with each other. The madam is positively lovely, Rhett said, jerking his head towards the now closed door, his dark hair falling into his eyes as he did so. I particularly liked how she described me as that man, as if she doesn't know my name by now. See, I like their playfulness.
Yeah, exactly. And that feels like it doesn't say all the answers, but it says enough.
Right? Exactly. And you kind of, she probably doesn't, Rosin said. She probably hasn't bothered to learn your name. I also wouldn't repeat, she probably, because again, publishing. You know what with you being a soldier and a ruffian and a bad influence on me and my reputation. Rhett's chestnut brown eyes danced. Oh, she thinks you have a reputation, a good one that can be lowered, that is.
Not like a brother, I just gotta say. Like,
yeah, actually, and that's I think so. When I went into this section, all I remembered was cute boy banter, and I forgot the brotherly line. That said, this is a queer retelling, so I don't think this is the main ship. But yeah, I guess I was looking for the Aspen of the book. Though, just as a note, I really hate Aspen. If anyone needed to know my selection feelings, he's literally the worst. So,
does anyone like Aspen?
Huh?
Does anyone like him?
Someone must, right?
I don't know.
I feel like any self-respecting woman who wants to be treated properly doesn't like him, but maybe some people like whiny babies who complain when their girlfriends try to, be nice to them. I have such strong feelings about him. He's like one of my least favorite characters of YA ever. Anyway, so my overall feeling here, I love this concept. It's really exciting. And there's there's lovely voice here. Like, and it switched. When you switched between her and Madame Salish and her and Rhett, like you feel a difference in how these characters interact with each other. And that's all really good. Like this, it feels like a really good YA fantasy retelling. It's just kind of tightening and like thinking about how you're revealing the information in the introduction. So.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm glad people like my Aspen ranting. It's what I'm here for. Strong feelings. So, okay, the next one, it's another YA, Project Bloodstone. Although I just talked all over you, Emily. What?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Again, similar to the previous one, like I just want to know what she's feeling about this dinner. Is she? We've got a sense that she kind of wants to get out of the Madame Salish, like that she's annoying her, but is she want to get out because she's excited for this dinner, or does she want to get out just because that woman's annoying? Like,
yes.
So it'll help us build momentum for us as a reader if we know like what emotions are propelling us from one scene to the next.
And again, it's threading character-based tension through something, because especially when you think about openings of books, you know what you're leading up to. So like kind of make sure that pulsing beat of tension is in there, but make it specific to character. Exactly. So this is Project Bloodstone, not the title. Like it's the, I love a person who keeps their title close to the vest. By Claire A. It is a YA gothic horror. So part 1, chapter 1, and I put a note here. So again, I know more about the pitch. This is 3 interconnecting novellas. So, and my note is to not actually say that when you're querying, because I think the word novella will scare agents. Just
We'll do it.
A novel told in 3 parts, like 3 POVs, which is totally like, I have a friend who has a thriller actually coming out that does that format. 3 parts, 3 POVs that can definitely, like, I guess you could technically call them novellas because they're short standalones. They intersect, but it's just a 3-part novel.
Well, that doesn't mean that they won't change the language around that at a later date. Like they might go back to novella, but it's just when you're querying, just don't say it.
Yeah, it just makes agents go like this, like shrivel up in horror. Okay, and then. So to that end, if this entire part is one girl, which I believe it is, label it part 1, Camilla, to anchor the reader in the POV of this part of the novel. Yeah. Hi, Claire. Yeah, she's in the chat. Yay. I realized belatedly, by the way, that with some of these other ones, I have horrific timing. I picked this time out. I thought I'd be nice to the Kiwis and the Aussies who always miss my live streams. And yet I think at least 2 of these samples are Brits who will be in bed by now. So you can catch it on the playback, and I apologize. Okay. This place is dying. Hard to believe it's spring. This is a tiny little line edit I suggested just to like improve the voice a little. Though the voice is great. I love that first line. Yeah. Hard to believe it's spring. The forest is a black silhouette against a stark white sky. The trees have a sickly pale bark sprouting brown spotted blue leaves. Sorry. I don't think that's a problem on the page. I just, the word vomit from me. Thin tendrils of fog slither around twisted tree trunks, stretching out to spike the wheels as the bus winds its way up the mountain. France had seemed promising, bright greens and blue skies, but the fog has followed us ever since we crossed the border, suffocating the land. I love this opening image.
Yeah, and I said this really sets our tone really well. Yeah. And like it has a voice that I'm like, okay, we're doing some gothic.
Yes. And there's a boarding school. So I'm on board. So, resting my head against the freezing window. Oh, that's a great sensory detail. Like I've done that. I feel that. I'm in it. I'm in this character. Helps distract me from the last 38 hours of travel, but I can feel every minute of it hanging under my eyes. It can't be that much longer. The few conversations that had held out are now dead. My note here, I just wasn't completely clear at first what this meant. I'm guessing it's people around her on the bus talking.
Well, I didn't know she was on a bus at that point, so the same.
Yeah. And who is everyone on the bus? Like, I'm just, this is where like I start to wonder about a tiny bit of context. I don't think it needs to be a huge detour. Exhaustion is hitting everyone, even those that haven't traveled as far as me. My neck aches, but I don't bother to move my shoulders. The knots in my back have nestled next to each other and fallen asleep. The mountain peaks shift, giving the open horizon a breath before they huddle back together. I love that. Right. Jealous. If only I could write atmospherically. Oh well. Giants shoulder to shoulder, like images. The bus screeches around the corner. Oh yes. So at this point, this is where I really need you to tell me where we are. However, I started to wonder in the first paragraph, crossing a border, Switzerland, Vermont, like sense of place. Since you mentioned crossing a border, I think maybe this is set in Europe. So just like maybe find a way to drip feed that in here.
And I highlighted the next one because if you notice the 3 sentences that start with the, and like the prose is great. Like like as we're saying, it's really good. Just keep an eye out for how often your sentences start with that. Simple.
Yes, absolutely. The bus screeches around a corner, the wheels just keeping their grip on the road. The others wake back to life. I'm used to rides like this still. And actually, that should be a semicolon. I missed that one. Sorry, see, grammar. I'm used to bus rides like this still. I can't help but grip the crucifix, hiding. In the notch beneath my neck was very awkward, so my suggestion is to make it clavicle because it's specific.
Or whatever, just some, yeah.
Yeah. I just had a moment where I was like, the notch beneath my neck.
Right.
I had to think about it. So the mountains glare down at us, annoyed we've disturbed their sleep. A sudden spire pierces the sky, the clouds clearing and the sun brushing against a church steeple. I blink and it's already gone. The giants have closed the path. I just suggested this as having this as a separate. Oh, Emily suggested this as having a separate sentence because she's smart.
Because it is. It grammatically it has to be. And also just make sure it's not a huge deal. And like we all do this and it doesn't really matter. Our copy editors here, but generally like I blink and it's already gone. There should be a comma after I blink because we have 2 subjects and 2 verbs. Mm-hmm. Who cares? Like it's fine, but some people want to learn. Like I wanted to learn those things.
Yeah, they get you on copy editing. That's when you learn all of your faults. It's great. Finally, the road ends and the trees pull away to reveal Toltaire Girls Academy. It's not a school; it's a palace. I caught this as a repetition of giant. I would use a different word here, like enormous. Or sprawling, clawing buildings with stones that have sprouted thorns, like some ancient Katinga emerging from the mist. Faces press against the glass, uncaring about the cold. My breath clogs the window, and I wipe it clean with my sleeve as we pass the tennis courts.
I think I had a note on one of those parts. I don't know where it is, but I would think what I was saying is, again, I want to see
Here?
more. Yeah. I want to see what she is feeling. This is my repeating thing, is like, what are they feeling going into these scenes? And I don't mean the sense of like, you know, I'm sad or she's sad or whatever. It can just be as simple as an example here is I wipe it clean with my sleeve as we pass the tennis courts, needing or eager to see, or like something, just some emotional word that gets a sense of like, what is she want here? Is she dreading this? Is she apprehensive? Like, what are we feeling? And you don't need to linger on it. It can be as simple as one verb that has an emotional color to it.
Yeah. I'll finish reading that. We reach the main building, and the stone thorns reveal themselves to be snarling creatures hanging from ledges and watching over the grounds. I cut out there because you can't have it, but you also don't need it. Ready to jump out if not for the ivy and vines that bind them to the weathered stones. The building itself is cut into the cliff face behind it. This is so creepy. We love it. I shuffle in my seat. My note here is that if like shuffle feels like the wrong word. Squirm, shift. Yeah. I was expecting this place to feel rich. The imposing, that's actually a good line about her expectations, which goes back to your feelings question.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe getting a little bit of that before.
Expectation. And then what, like, I still don't know if this is somewhere she wants to be or somewhere she doesn't want to be.
Yes. The imposing buildings, the sports grounds. I wasn't expecting it to feel so old.
I said, that's great. We love to see a reversal of expectations.
Which also goes to the sense of place, because if you tell me this is in Switzerland, this all makes a lot more sense. Though I guess it can make sense in Vermont too. I don't know why I pulled Vermont out, but overgrown and forgotten like a lost graveyard. Maybe I made a mistake, worked so hard to get here only to find that it's useless to me. No, I pushed that thought away.
I love that. I love having some internal conflict. That's bread and butter for writing. So great job.
And again here, I want a full stop there because I prefer this as a separate sentence. This place reeks of the sort of money that can't be spent. Oh, I love that line. Mm-hmm. Money that only goes away when there's no descendant left to claim it. With that sort of money comes prestige. This is where I'm going to grab my future.
This whole paragraph is like really good. And like we're saying, the visuals throughout have been great. And then here we're getting a lot of really poignant like descriptions of things. And here is, we have what the character wants. She's here to grab her future. And now I'm curious, like, how?
And why?
Yeah.
Why was she in France? The bus halts, gives a final shudder before the doors open with a thud. I ignore the way the building looms over me as I grab my bag. A sharp voice behind me, however, is impossible to ignore.
I did that because otherwise the repetition didn't read well to me to say ignore twice. But if you make it intentional, it's like, yeah, I meant to say it twice. You can see because of my other word here.
Yeah, and then the copy editor can't get you.
Yeah.
I just want to tell everyone, like, literally, they copy edited my acknowledgments and dinged me for word repetition. Like,
you're like, yeah, I said thank you a lot. That's how it is.
You got to even thank people with creative language. It was fun. Well, it's impressive you only look that bad considering how long the flight was. The laughter that follows is awkward, unsure if it was an insult or a compliment. I roll my entire head along with my eyes and push past the girl who spoke. I like the physicality there, by the way, the aggression. Her bag swings into my gut. Ugh. It nearly knocks me to my knees. I suck in a breath and shove her bag away. She tilts her head to the side and flashes me a smile that is very clearly not an apology. I love the aggression and tension here. Whoops, she says before turning back to the small pack she's collected. Her shoulders are broad and she's a head taller than me. An athlete, but her bag is covered in academic award pins. Doesn't want to miss an opportunity to let everyone know why she's here. Exactly the type I was expecting to find. I walk past and throw my bag over my shoulder, letting it smack her in the head as I go. So my note here is you get to it later, but when I read this paragraph, my first thought was, what does this girl look like?
That's like I know that I get that note all the time. So don't like it every time I write a book, they're like, can you describe what they look like?
Yeah.
So It's a good
I
one.
think it's mostly that I wanted an immediate mental image beyond tall and broad to just like create I just wanted to create a face for her like at that instant. So you have some of it down here, and I would find ways to just like thread it in a little sooner, even just like little things like it's as simple as the blonde, but even better if you can find really artful, specific ways to maybe give a sense of what she looks like. Whoops. Watch it. She almost rips the bag from my fingers as she yanks it toward her. Walk away, just walk away, I tell myself. I might do that on a separate line. But my feet won't move. Exhaustion has stolen my patience. I stare her down. She's larger than I thought. So bags drag her eyes down and her white skin looks clammy. She's probably got as much patience as I do. This is technically description, but I still wasn't personally able to land on an image. Personally. They're good details though. Are you going to apologize for that? For what? An accident? I slip the words between my teeth and she takes a step forward. My throat bobs, fighting the urge to step back. I wasn't sure what this meant. Maybe it's not.
Yeah. It might be a swallow. I don't know.
Yeah. But fighting the urge to step, I think there's a subject verb agreement issue.
Definitely subject verb agreement. Your throat does not fight the urge.
But she smirks. Are you lost or just new to places like this? She runs a hand through, and here we get it. She runs a hand through her short blonde hair, and I squint as something reflects into my eyes. Did she just flash a diamond bracelet at me?
A great detail.
I love that detail, and I kind of want it sooner. At least the hair part. And I think I had another note here somewhere. Or maybe I didn't put it in here. Like, I almost want something much up here, like a tiny little line. I know pop culture references are dangerous, so you don't have to do a pop culture reference, but like, is it like Blair Waldorf doesn't have a pinched expression, but it's like, she's, baby fine features like Blair Waldorf, which is not what this character looks like. Like,
one thing that
someone
in ours is like, oh, he looks like a young Kennedy. If you want to
yeah, exactly. Like, give us just something that allows us to go into our bank of mental images and just like give her a face, whatever face we want her to have earlier on. Just because it's such a physical scene, and it's a very good physical scene. I don't think, not when it comes to arrogant rich assholes. It's a consistent problem. It's not till my fist makes contact with her jaw that I've realized I fucked up. The pain in my hand fades and she stares at me, utterly stunned. I don't think she's ever been in a fight.
I love that, because what we're saying, of course, is that she has been in a fight, and it's like we get a lot just from like a simple read between the lines here.
Exactly. Conflicts at her old school must have been resolved by whose daddy could fire the other. I love that. Look, I'm cut off as she crashes into my stomach, tackling me to the ground. Her arms are thick, and I can't dislodge them, but the sudden panic makes me kick out to try to push her away. Girls! She pulls away instantly, and I'm left on the ground looking like someone who both started and lost a fight. I like that detail. The woman standing above me has silver hair tied into a tight bun, her face as stern as the cliff looming above us. I like that too. My note here is that I don't think you need this here. I've really fucked up because we know, and for me it kind of broke the teacher stuff. Because the next line is, her eyes skip between the two of us and finally settles on me. My heart sinks. So Camilla Silva, or Camilla Silva, I like that name. I nod. She turns and summons me forward with a flick of her thin wrist before I can say anything. I grip my bag and follow. What else can I do? The crowd parts and watches. Dead girl walking. I like that too. This must be a first, about to be expelled before orientation. I can see this is where I am culturally insufficient. Do you speak Spanish, Emily?
No, my grandma does.
I'm terrible. But I like that detail. I am getting senses of who Camila is from tiny details.
Yeah.
Shaking her head with a click of her tongue, throwing her arms up in the air. How could I throw my dancing scholarship away? How could I give up my future? Don't I know how hard she's worked to pay for those lessons? Ballet shoes aren't cheap.
So I flagged that because I really like that you're giving us a sense of stakes. Like right off the bat here, we know that she has given something up to be here. And so like we are wondering if this gamble is going to pay out. I do have a question though, and that I don't quite understand how this seems like a very prestigious, rich boarding school. I don't know how that is throwing away a future generally. Like I'm not saying it's not, but generally our connotations of that are that is a future, that is going to get her entrance into whatever thing she wants next. So just explain, how is this throwing away the future? It kind of depends on what future she'd envisioned, but like a scholarship sounds like going to a new kind of boarding school. Those don't seem contradictory to me.
Yeah. And then I cut it off here just because like it was more of the same, like in a good way. The voice is sharp. I'm really interested in this. It's just kind of the notes that we had about anchoring us a little bit. And yeah, I mean, this is just my kind of jam.
It's really great. And I think that like the character has come through a lot in the opening pages, which is hard to do.
Yeah. And importantly, I definitely am like, what's going to happen next? She just like punched this girl on the bus. Like, so. All right. And actually, before we go on to the next one, there are 2 left. There was a good question up here because we're talking a lot about grammar. So I think this is a good question. How important when querying are these superfine details in sentence structure and grammar? Obviously doing your best is good, but does this count against you in a query? Not so much the query, but the pages, potentially.
Right. It depends on like what kind of grammar errors we're talking about. Like if you're missing the comma I pointed out, no one's going to care. That's fine. Yeah. But if you are having run-on sentences or like in terms of like
consistently,
yeah, or like you're having drop subjects or something, like that's going to stand out. So you want to put as polished as you can. And honestly, the grammar check on Word is pretty good. And if you just have one other person read it, like you're really fine.
Yeah, it's basically the point at which it becomes an issue is if it makes it confusing to read, if it limits, kind of bumping along and kind of understanding what's going on. And then I liked this comment from Lexi. When an agent is deciding to take you on, they are going to weigh the work it will take to bring your novel to publishing quality against you. This is definitely true, but it varies. Some agents are not editorial, and yes, they really are going to look for something they don't have to line edit or copy edit. They want to be able to send it to editors immediately. I'd say most agents are editorial, however, more and more, but then they're going to vary. So it might be that they decide this just needs too much line level. I might give in a revise and resubmit instead, or so on. It's just really gonna vary agent to agent how much they are willing to do.
Yeah.
But perfection is definitely not required. My book definitely had some issues when I queried it. We fixed it. It's fine. Okay. All right, we'll just jump into the next one. If you guys do have questions, think about them because you got 2 samples left, and then we're going to do some Q&A. It can be about anything, but even better if it relates to first pages and whatnot, or rom-coms or what have you. So this is by Lizzie Dix, GRIMM, The Girl and the Wolf, and it is a middle grade fantasy. And my little note here was the title did not have a colon, and I think it should have a colon. I think it will really look a lot. It'll make it clear that it's Grimm, The Girl and the Wolf, though really GRIMM. And like, we're going to assume that stands for something, and it adds to kind of the allure of the world. So, the flowers on Brendan Red's grave were dead. They lay twisted and broken like the body 6 feet below. We both were like, that's a great opening.
There you go. Good opening.
Good opening 2 lines.
Yeah.
And I did a whole video on first lines, and you know my feelings about it. It's not always just the first line. Like, it's how it builds, and this builds. To the whole first paragraph, in fact. Susie picked them up and let the dried out petals scatter in the wind. In their place, she laid a sprig of witch hazel, then stood up and surveyed her work. Next to the weeds and the grasses that spread languidly over the grave, I just put a little note here. It's a nitpick, but languidly feels like the wrong word to me. At least when I think of weeds, I don't think of them being languid. I think of them being tangled, and like I think of a harsher words. I put tangle, snag. It's just a thought. The witch hazel looked small and insignificant, a foolish man-made attempt to honor the dead. She frowned and readjusted it so it peaked above the grass. My thought here was the repetition of it just felt like a missed opportunity to be more specific. I feel like with the second one, you could say, so my suggestion, I don't know what witch hazel looks like, so my suggestion is wrong, I'm sure, that the green tips peaked above the grass or what have you. Whatever it looks like. Yeah. Emily?
Oh, yes. Okay, so I just want to know, like, we're starting at a grave. This seems to have been in the ground for a while now. So I just want to know, why is your character here now? What impulse brought her to this grave at this moment? Because it'll help us, one, get into character, and it'll help us like propel the scene again. If we just know, like, was this a whim? Was this a planned trip? Like, why is she here? Does she have like a purpose for being here?
And this comes in later because we've read through the whole sample. There is some issues with her being here. It turns out there's some conflict. Right. And actually, I might as well say, because we've read through the sample, I also would want to start really having this anchored in her age at this point, because it is a middle grade. And because we have read the sample, we don't find out how old she is for a little too long, in my opinion. In the 3 years since his death, nature had crept back into Brendan Redd's resting place. Easy place to put a sense of age, by the way, because 3 years, what is 3 years to this girl? How old is she? Yeah. 3 years to a 12-year-old, that's like 8 million years. It's like 9 and 12 are two very different things. I think she is 12. Roots and grasses had covered the bare earth, and worms had made their casts out of his flesh. In a way, this comforted Susie. She liked to think that in the worms and the flowers and the trees, a part of him was still there, watching over her. I really like this interiority. And I think combined with more of what Emily talked about, like firmly establishing the want and the context of this scene, I think it'll play really, really well. From the bottom of the hill, an old man loped over to her. His features were grizzled, his build lean. Something in his eyes seemed sad, an unreadable sorrow that only he bore.
Yeah, I just felt like I wasn't ready for this yet. Like, this feels like an event happening to her, and I just want to feel her emotions. I think it'll help to know why she's here, because then that will color this moment. Is this an intruder? Is this someone she like recognizes or planned to meet here? Like, it is, if we give what our character wants and what they're feeling at every time, it also helps every next moment, because the emotions will change with everything. So this will not feel sudden if it's like she is kind of like grumbling at someone coming up to her, or is like happy to have someone to distract her from what she's looking at. Just an emotion.
And we also come to know who he is, and he is a vital person.
I was too. It felt like she doesn't know him by that description. Yeah. He does later, so just keep that consistent.
Well, and then generally, maybe we can talk about it right now up front before we read through the rest. I know something we both that came up for both of us was the POV, the tightness of the POV and the lens of the POV. Though this is just like the adult fantasy gets into my own personal limitations. I know that there are two schools of thought with third person and something like middle grade. It's third limited, close, and that's what I personally am most comfortable with, and that's what I keep wanting here. But third person omniscient is a accepted thing, and it stylistically can work very, very well. So this does have to, like, the author has to like know their category better than I do. However, as we go through, I think a lot of our notes speak to that. It doesn't feel close enough, this POV, because if this is from if this really is Susie's book, Susie's story, it should be immediate. He's not a stranger. There's no reason to pull that punch of who this person is. Then there are a couple other examples too where I was like, well, you'll see. But it's kind of tough because this is also very British. I can see that style in this sample, and that's good. And I feel like this is a very certain kind of book. So that is just my disclaimer, and I share it with you, that we are not middle grade writers.
Right.
But this is definitely the impression. So as he walked, he glanced at the other graves. There weren't many. Cotterill was only a small village. At the bottom of the hill, a memorial stone was laid with the names of those who fell in the great tragedy, but whose bodies had not been recovered. Past that, the graves were spread farther apart. A few near her father were fresher, victims of the last few months. The old man glanced at them, then turned his gaze to Susie. She nodded to him as he arrived. He stopped beside her, and together they surveyed the grave. And this is where I started really asking about the POV, because this feels super pulled back. This doesn't feel like a 12-year-old girl. And this is just when I started to have questions. Just the lens of the story. And then here, he was such a good man, your father. So Emily points this out as well. It's a little strange that we have those two paragraphs, but she knows who this is.
Right. Just say it. Just say that she knows who it is.
Consider the lensing. Susie nodded. He was a good man. He had been a good father, too, right up until the day he died, when one of Mr. Farrow's lumber jobs had gone wrong and his bones snapped like matchsticks beneath the tree. Oh, creepy visual. Love it. Yes. Farrow had put on the required airs and graces after her father's death, but his sympathy was hollow. When her mother couldn't make the rent a month later, he was the first one threatening to kick them out.
I have to say, this is an interesting world to get into in a middle grade. So I like that. I see a lot of these kinds of issues.
And I will say, just when we're talking about setup, later I did have, we'll go over it, I did have a lot of questions of like, where is the set? What is this world? Is this historical? Like, are they working in factories? Like, I'm definitely kind of curious about that here. Only Mr. Barullo had stopped him.
I was just like, oh, that's his name. Let's just say it at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. The grizzled old man was kinder than he seemed and had stepped in to pay their rent until Miriam Red could get back on her feet, and Susie's brother, Thomas, was old enough to work in the lumber fields. So this comes up, I have this note here, again with the lensing. I find it super weird for a 12-year-old to refer to her own mother by her full name. And so again, it's just, it's the question of POV and lensing. Yeah. I feel like at least in the US market, close third is traditional for middle grade. So if you do, like, I would bear that in mind. He put his arm around her shoulder. They stayed like this for a moment. The wind blew her hair into her face, but she stayed still and let the coarse black strands whip across her eyes.
The repetition of stayed and stayed.
She didn't need to see to think about her father. After a few minutes, Mr. Barullo turned to her, something unreadable in his expression. Your mother's looking for you. Why? Susie looked at him, surprised. Not sure you need that because you have this. Actually. Miriam Red, again, really weird to refer to your mother by her full name because it took me a minute. I was like, wait, is this her mom? A little confusing. Usually wanted her out of the way. Here we finally get her age. A wiry 12-year-old with a talent for getting dirty was not what Susie's mother wanted to spend her time on. I want this sooner, for sure. She was trying to run a washing business. She didn't have time to raise a child as well. Repetition.
Yeah.
Until she was old enough to work, Susie was like a stain on one of Miriam's dresses, an inconvenience that needed to be that needed dealing with, but only when absolutely necessary.
I like that we get a sense of conflict here, and I just also want to push it one step farther. That we like, is she resentful of this? Probably. I don't know. But so like, just color it a little bit more. But I love that we have some conflict here.
Yeah. Mr. Barullo's unreadable expression twitched, the hint of a smile in his eye. I'm not exactly sure what she wants. She was yelling at me and as I went past, something about hot cakes? Oh, gods. Good. You have very different notes.
Like that. I like the turn here.
So you said good emotional turn of the scene. Yes. I said, this is my personal pet peeve because it is. If there better be multiple gods in your world build, basically.
I don't mean the word gods. I like that she is like immediately at a grave, and now we're like, oh crap, the hotcakes. Like,
yes. So this is just like, this is my pet peeve to you. If your world doesn't have multiple gods, don't use this. And this is maybe because I come from fan fiction, and specifically I come from the world of Harry Potter fan fiction. everyone and their mother would just like stick this into their stories. And it's annoying to me. Unless it's for a reason. Because this is a great way to signal this is a fantasy world where there are multiple gods. But if not, I don't know why she's saying that. So, yeah. That's literally just me being nitpicky. But yeah, giving you my true thoughts. Susie twisted out of Barullo's grip and started running down the hill. The old man, was she in his grip?
They were holding, he had his arm around her.
Oh, okay. See?
Yeah.
I'm paying attention. The old man laughed. So maybe I wouldn't call it grip. I think grip, that makes me think he was like grabbing her. Ooh.
Yeah.
The old man laughed as she ran, then turned back to the grave, a pensive expression on his face. This is another thing with POV. Decide how close you want to be, because if you want to be close, she wouldn't see this. At the bottom of the hill, Susie turned left past the village square and around the corner to the Reds' family home. Again, this is all comes down to POV. I prefer third close, and so this, like, all these omniscient-y type things, like, made me twitch. So I don't know if it bothered you, Emily, but it bothered me.
It depends on what you want stylistically. Generally, I would say most middle grade is closer. But
yeah, and I think mostly because you have to think about who's going to read this, and it might even be like we read the first one, which is an adult fantasy, but it has a 10-year-old protagonist. Is this an adult novel?
Right.
That has a 12-year-old protagonist, or is it a pure middle grade? I want to say if it's a pure middle grade, it has to be closer. Mm-hmm. But also with that disclaimer, I should get someone who writes middle grade to do one of these critiques. She opened the door and crashed into their kitchen. An overpowering smell of burnt dough permeated the room. From the corner, Miriam Red stared at her reproachfully. I've taken them out of the oven, Susie. I almost want a tag on this only because I had to read this twice to get the tone on this, just saying. But that I still like this interaction. She followed her mother's gaze to a tray of regularly spaced mounds of flattened black something. The smell of charcoal wafted off them in thin tendrils of smoke. This feels like a subject-verb disagreement kind of thing. A smell isn't physical. I mean, it is, but it isn't. But there's something about the way this is written that just literally right now caught me. Am I crazy?
No, I see what you're saying. That is not a visual.
Something, yeah, a steam or anyway. Yeah. Her gray eyes narrowed as she glanced across from them to the other two trays, her previous attempts. Again, this is where I know it's third person, but I'm feeling very outside of this character because this is a very hovery, omniscient thing, which again is just a choice. Was it too much to ask you to keep an eye on them for 15 minutes? It took me this long to connect that it was Susie's job to take the hotcakes out of the oven. So I might do something further up to like have an interiority moment. Susie going, "Oh crap, I forgot the hotcakes" or something. Mm-hmm. You had one job. Just a thought. Susie hung her head. "Sorry, Mum, I was visiting Dad." Her mother softened. She looked tired. Brendan had that effect on her. Again, it's her dad. I had to remember that this was her dad.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, they're done now. You'll have to take them to Grandma's as they are. We haven't got enough flour for another attempt. Susie looked at the burnt mess. Saying she would make hot cakes was very different from actually making them. Cooking had never been her forte. Here, she preferred being outside in the forest and in the cozy confines of the kitchen. If she was a boy, she could work as a woodcutter like her brother. It was hard and exhausting work, but at least it meant he got to stay outside. As I read this, I wanted a sense of how old he is. Mm-hmm. As a girl, the best Susie could hope for was a happy and extremely uneventful domestic future.
I like that we are now getting kind of existential, like her bigger need almost. We are implying of what she needs out of this book and the conflict that comes with it because she is in a world where she doesn't get this.
I would love a touch of this earlier. Mm-hmm. With you mentioning why is she at the grave? And we also know from reading on, she ran off and didn't keep an eye on the hot cakes.
I have a point later that it makes me wonder if the opening, I feel like you can keep the grave opening, but if an opening image really tells you about your character, and I think that there's more to this character than being at her dad's grave. So it seems like maybe she ran off into the woods and then got distracted by her dad's grave or something that gives us a sense of why is she out here right now? And why is she the character? Like, why is she specifically what in her has brought her out here?
Exactly. She tried to satisfy her mother's domestic ambitions, but the pull of the world outside was too great to resist. The acrid smell of the timber yard, the comforting darkness of the forest, the feeling of running through the woods, dodging trees and briars and crawling through unseen spaces, and then coming home at the end of the day with twigs tangled in her hair, her freckles hidden beneath a layer of grime. Yeah, I also agree. I like all of this. I would love to kind of think about that opening, as you said. But I also had a note here that this is almost contributing to a sense of distance for me as well, that I personally would rather see all of this. You're giving me these details, but you could also show this through some scenes and pepper in these ideas. It feels a little like backstory to me.
Right. Example, and this, you totally don't have to do this at all. It's like, because we really love those opening lines, so we get that you want to like keep it like that. But just after that, is she out of breath? Did she run there? Is she dirty? You know, like things that like get at some of what Ellis is saying, that we could see these details.
Yes, her mom could comment, you know, like she should, you know, that thing moms do with a thumb.
Yeah.
like show us this exactly, that she goes out and she gets dirty.
Yeah.
Like, did she go out for a run in the woods? Like, did she go out to pick berries and then sidetrack to the grave and forgot about the hotcakes? And like, yeah. Which again, for me, raises questions about the world. What is this world? Is this historical? Is it a village in the middle of nowhere? I do also want more of those details. Okay, so I have this noted. I won't read the entire paragraph. This feels like info dumping for me, especially given I know that what happens next has nothing to do with grandma, and you're actually barreling toward a very interesting conflict. This feels, you don't need it here. She wondered what Grandma Red would say about the hotcakes, with her brother busy in the lumberyard and her mother confined to washing. Susie was the only one with time to visit Grandma Red. And so it talks about this. She enjoys her visits. When I first read this, I thought, oh, she's going to go visit her grandmother right now. But the scene totally shifts after this. So I don't think you could say in one line, oh, drat, at least, you know, she was the only one who really had time to go see grandma. At least she enjoyed her company or something.
Right.
Actually, this line, Susie looked from the burnt hotcakes to her mother and slumped. Her company alone would have to satisfy Grandma Red.
That's good. Yeah.
Now, if you did have her go visit Grandma Red, by the way, these are the things that you would pepper through a scene. Yeah. I'm sure she's later, especially because, like, I mean, Grandma Red, Grimm, like, you know, this is a Grimm's fairy tale-esque thing. Yeah. And again, with sense of place, if you're doing that, is this set in Germany? Like, I'm curious. I have so many questions. Love it. You know, I like Germany. So the front door opened and Susie and her mother turned around. Thomas had come in for his morning break and was taking off his muddy boots by the door. He hung up his coat, walked into the kitchen, saw the hotcakes, and left. Again, Susie glared at him and he winked at her. He took after their mother looks-wise, all brown hair and brown eyes. The lumber work had made him muscular for his age. Again, I want to know his age. And I like a little more family dynamics, I suppose, but he carried himself with an easy friendliness which removed any sense of intimidation. So I'm going to note that, because I put it here, I started skimming around here because it gets here and it's like, how was work, love? Good, Thomas replied. This feels outside of Susie. This feels like this little scene that is happening, and because I'm not anchored in the POV, I don't know why I should care. And right. I don't know what it's leading up to. So I skimmed a little because I wanted to know. Again,
also, don't character John Green in a children's book just because he's the most famous children's book.
Yes, very good point. In fact, don't kill John Green because that's what's coming next. Or at least he disappears. So that's the thing. I skimmed a little. I wanted to know how old Thomas was. I wanted to know what a hotcake is. I realized I don't really know what a hotcake is. I assume it's a pancake. But you can give me something about your world by telling me more about hotcakes. Bear that in mind. It could also just be British and you're laughing at me because you're like, you're dumb. Why don't you know what a hotcake is? But just FYI. And we have a little backstory dropping about who John Green is. There's back and forth. And then it matters here. Where does Mr. Barullo come in? Here. Thomas picked up the second slice of bread and was about to shove it in his mouth when a high-pitched wail came from outside. Miriam looked at him with alarm, and they both started for the door. By the way, if you anchor this to Susie, this should all be from Susie's point of view. Wait, I didn't mean to drag that. It opened as they got there to reveal Mr. Barullo. He stood there for a second, blocking out the light, his shoulders heaving from recent excursion. After a moment, he spoke, his voice hoarse, caught in his throat. You've got to come quickly, Miriam. You too, Thomas. It's little John Green. Yeah, definitely changed the name. He was found this morning. Ooh. And I'm like, this is it. This is what this is leading to. This is exciting. I don't care about that other stuff.
Right.
To be honest.
Also, this does explain starting at the grave too. It feels it all ties together. And
introduce Mr. Barullo and
indent your paragraphs like we were saying in the earlier one too. I'm noticing that this one has
Susie's mother and Thomas dropped what they were doing. The piece of bread in Thomas's hand dropping to the kitchen table. Repetition. As he stood, they ran to the door, following Mr. Barullo outside. Thomas turned around at the doorway, his face grave. You'd better come too, Susie. Her heart thudding, Susie placed the basket on the stone floor and hurried after her family. And I cut it off at this point. This is it. I'm like, oh, damn, a kid is found. Like,
the pre-game opening.
This is the inciting incident, and what I would want to see, kind of, this speaks to your notes as well. Is this starting in the right place? Mm-hmm. I like the opening image of the grave, so you're right. Does it lead to something else before she goes home? I definitely would not drag out the home scene as much. And actually, to that end, it's kind of weird that Mr. Barullo is just at the grave, and now he's running in saying a kid is dead.
And so at the grave, really, you don't need him at the grave.
Yeah. So just to think about those things, that the questions, kind of the world building, the anchoring, and that, like, I personally want to get to that inciting incident because that's exciting.
And it's also, a really interesting world being like,
I'm trying to remember the pitch. I did look at the pitch. I think it's like her grandma was like a monster hunter, and the girl has to like go into the family business. It's something like that. I'm like, thumbs up emoji. Like, yes.
Yeah.
Let's get to it. Which brings us to our last submission, which is adult romance retelling. And I'm just scanning your comments. Emily, did you have final thoughts as well? I kind of barreled over you there. Everyone's going to be like, Alexa's the terrible friend. Yeah,
no. Just that, like, give us a little bit more of the closer characters. We can see character, but like, we're asking these questions about the world because we're interested, which is like a good thing. Like, we want to know more because it seems like a unique setting for a middle grade novel. I'm intrigued.
Yeah. And some of the images are gorgeous.
Yeah.
And I liked the kind of sadness of the grief in there. I just personally want to be, and this, I'm pretty sure it's pretty standard. I want to be closer to Susie as a POV protagonist personally. So, all right. So last is Once Persuaded, Twice Shy by Tina March. And this is a retelling of Persuasion. Yay. We know why she sent this to me. So I'm just going to jump right in. And like, I was trying to get you a romance, Emily. And I think I did 2 last time, and I really didn't. Just for everyone watching, y'all sent me a lot of fantasy. Bless you, which is fine. I was trying to vary genres. Okay.
Also, first do the formatting, and also honestly change the font. Like, this is not just be Times New Roman on this.
Oh, it's possible I did something, but yes.
Okay. I don't know if anyone else has their book in, what is that, Arial or whatever, just change it.
Although maybe it wasn't Arial. Maybe it did copy over. You might be right. Yeah, anyway, because that was font. Okay, so the first 4 times his godmother called him that night, Anthony let it go to voicemail. He was busy, it was late, and if it was urgent, she could always call his office. So then she called his office.
I love opening with humor. Very hard to do.
Good voice, good rhythm. Like that lands. Anne, he said as soon as he picked up the receiver, I'm so sorry, is everything? Anthony, where are you? Are you okay?
So this is throughout this, just give us much more description. You're great at dialogue, and you're going to see like the dialogue is really charming. It leaps on the page, and like it seems like it must come easy to you. So like now you got to do the description, and I know it. Like I hate to do the description too. I mean, I think we all do. I think we all hate to do it, but you just pepper it in more.
Yeah, like and same. You'll see that consistency for my notes as well as we move through this. Across the board, gems here. I want more of everything. I say it at the end, so I'll just say it now. This sample, you'll see as we read through it, it has the bones, the voice, the humor, the rhythm. It needs more meat. To sit in a sense of the place of the scene, to get details about who these characters are, etc.
Right. Just what is he looking at? What is he sitting? Is he standing? Just little things.
Yeah. Anthony blinked and looked down at himself to confirm no bullet holes anywhere in his body, as he'd suspected. Do you know something I don't? A long, long pause. Oh, Anthony, you don't know, do you? And that is how Anthony Elliott received the third worst news he'd ever received in his life. The company was insolvent. So my note here is that this opening is very punchy, and I like it, but it's also confusing me a little, and it's about that kind of sense of place. What company? Where is he? I would draw this out, because think of this as the establishment of the status quo, and the company is insolvent, which is the persuasion of they have to not sell the house, but they have to like rent. They have to leave. They have to rent the house. This is like the punchline. I want a little bit more of like the status quo before the shoe drops, to set up sense of place, to set up character, especially because the next scene, which we're about to go in, is in the boardroom, which wasn't clear to me at first. And his dad runs the company. So like, I want like Anthony at his desk and like, oh, he has coffee on his shirt and oh, how did he not know? Like, give me like details. Like, is he working on a spreadsheet on an expense report? Is he emailing? Like you can kind of build and draw out the scene, and you can. I thought about it, and I was thinking, because you want to preserve these opening lines, maybe right after this. So then she called his office. Maybe you back up to like, the day had started out promising enough, or like it had been a disaster of a day from the start, and then like give us something to kind of grab onto. I want to know what this company's called. I want to know what they do. And then you bring me to it being insolvent, which is so British. Love it. Okay, so then we jump into a new scene. And my note again is I want more scene setting here, peppering in transitional details, scene setting, how he got here. I'm not sure I like your tone, Anthony. Anthony took a deep breath and looked up at his father with a tight smile. Sorry, how could this have happened, sir? Walter Elliott sneered and turned on his heel to resume pacing the length of the boardroom. And then I'm like, oh, they're in a boardroom. Give me more, basically. Anthony rolled his eyes and sat back in his chair.
And yeah, we need physical descriptions of Walt. You do a good way of describing Anthony in the next paragraph, but let's also get a sense of Walter.
Ooh, great suggestion in the chat from Leah. This is a great suggestion. Because you're right, she is trying to reach him. Maybe it's an escalation, and he finally picks up.
Mm-hmm.
Whoops. Okay. All right. Among the catalog of ways Anthony had disappointed his father, there were 3 fatal offenses. The first, he was not handsome. The second, he was a lawyer. And actually give us little bits of that before in the scene setting. A deposition, not a spreadsheet, or whatever. And the third, he was a fat, unhandsome lawyer.
Yeah. I love the voice here. I think that this is, you have a great tone and a great sense of humor, and it comes through in the dialogue and in the prose, and that's really,
and it's apropos. It's very modern Jane Austen,
right?
And my thought here, my spitball thought, it was like, ooh, maybe this is opens this section.
Mm-hmm.
It starts among the catalog of ways, and then you back into the scene setting, and then coming back to the interaction. If Anthony had been considerate enough to have tempered the first 2 infractions by staying in shape, Walter Elliott might have forgiven him one day. But the first 2 I'm a mess. The first two transgressions were redeemable. The third, unpardonable. Unpardonable.
A great modern Austen voice here. So well done.
Man. Maybe I haven't had enough coffee, and that's why my mouth can't do this. Okay, so he is not fat, Anne said anytime Walter mentioned it, which was generally whenever he saw, spoke of, or thought of his son. That's ridiculous. But Anthony was heavier than he had been 10 years ago, before law school, a failed engagement, and 8 years at a law firm had taken their toll on his body and led him to develop 1, a semi-permanent hunch, 2, a non-existent exercise regimen, and 3, a propensity to eat street food at his desk. That sounds delicious. My thought here is that this fell into info dumping for me. Not literally. It's obviously not a bunch of paragraphs. And I'm not saying cut this. I like this. I think it was the hint of flashback that got me, especially because slightly down here, I realize Anne is in the room. So like, it's just the scene setting again. I want to know that Anne's in the room and you can have this, but maybe even better. What if his dad cracks about him being fat in the room in the present, and Anne says this in the present?
Right.
And then you keep this because this is hilarious.
Right.
And my note was, this is a lot for page 2. So just kind of stretching these scenes and building because it's a delicious build. There's a lot going on. It's great. Mm-hmm. And then also acquired an occasional smoking habit, a sensitivity to capital letters, and reading glasses, but those weren't important. Well, Walter wasn't crazy about the glasses. It's very good voice.
Yeah, and I love that we're learning a lot about Walter through all of this.
Yeah. So yeah, fleshier narrative is my new term. Fleshy. Ooh. Yeah. Okay. Anthony appreciated Anne's interference, but his father's criticism of him was something he was accustomed to at this point. He'd learned to simply stay out of the man's way. And my note here that I didn't delete was, I feel like she should be in the room, and then she is. Yeah. So
just start the chapter with like, is someone like frantically pacing? Is someone sitting? What
does the boardroom look like?
Like, what's happening?
What's the view out the window? That also is going to give us a sense of place, though. I assume this is in London, so, but like, that's good stuff to give us. You can hardly, that was a lot easier when his father hadn't run the company into the ground.
Right. So I love that we're getting a sense of conflict here, and it's done very succinctly, which you don't need more. We understand what the dynamic's going to be here.
You can hardly blame this on us now, Tony, Walter said, pacing the length of the boardroom. We've done everything we possibly could to keep the company afloat. It's not our fault the market is terrible. I'm adding so much inflection here. Love it. I mean, the lines are great. That's right. Look, Elizabeth waved a piece of paper at them.
Elizabeth seems to have like vaporized into the scene. So just like, has she been here the whole, and who is she? Is she a part of the company? Is she a family member? Just give us a 1-sentence intro.
Persuasion fans know, but you have to kind of assume an outsider isn't going to know.
But I didn't know he was in the scene.
Yeah, it's exactly. Anthony wasn't entirely confident she hadn't grabbed just a random scrap piece of paper. You can cut piece of. Look, we've laid off all non-essential employees. We didn't host any charity events this year, and we stopped putting fresh flowers in the lobby. What else were we to do? I hate these people. I love it.
I know, it's very funny.
Just spitballing here, Anthony said. But maybe not paying thousands of dollars in bonuses. That should be thousands of dollars in bonuses. And also, is this set in the US? See, scene setting's important. Is the view outside the boardroom New York? Tell me this. In bonuses to executive officers could have been a starting point.
And here, this is an opportunity to give us, we don't want the paragraphs to just be dialogue and dialogue tags. Like, we can get emotions, and we can have a paragraph here or after that has him saying, like, it seems like he doesn't really like or respect his family that much, or how they handle this, certainly. So like, how has this been over time for him? Like, is this a like, of course, like, that's the way of my family. They are blah, 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 blah. Fill in the details. And then how he views it will tell us a lot about him and his relationship to them.
Yeah. His father and sister both glared at him, and even Anne shot him a cross look. And this is where I was like, oh, wait, she's here. Oh, plus just a note. I know this is probably a nod to persuasion, but Anne is way too close to Anthony. And I know you had the same note, Emily.
Yeah, I know.
Like, you do have to be careful with your nods becoming too much. I would only keep some of the names personally.
Yeah.
Like the sister doesn't have to be Elizabeth, for example. And I would definitely give Anne a different name.
Yeah.
I don't need you to tell me how to run my business, Walter spat the words at him. If you thought you could do better, you should have stayed in the family business instead of... But what about your lawyers, your accountants? Anne cut in. Did none of them say anything? Did none of them warn you this might happen? Yes, well, I can't be expected to read everything those people send me, Antony scoffed. And, oh, wait. Is this... Oh, okay. This is... That's Walter. So that's going to have to be separate. Because I was like, wait, why would Antony say that? So this probably needs either... I'd give it an action tag rather than a dialogue tag. Anchor this to Walter. And then Antony scoffed and rolled his eyes again. Why would you bother to read emails from your advisors anyway? And I was unclear who this was. If it's him and it's internal, you can do italics. His father glared at him. So I assume his father glared at him because he caught him scoffing. I would connect these things a little better. Likely it was all their bills that got us here in the first place. Hold on. Who's saying this? Actually, I'm a little confused.
Yeah.
So just be careful of that. Antony took a deep breath and thought about the hundreds of Chapter 11 filings he drafted in his life. He had never imagined that it would be Kelnich Inc. that he would be drafting it for. The company was doomed and all 200 and some employees were going to suffer for it, and his mother's legacy was going down in smoke with it all.
Yeah, so just expand. You have like the beginning of the paragraph and now do the rest of the paragraph. We get a sense of like what that means to him. Like, you know, his mother seems to be dead, and this is Persuasion, but like imagine that people have not read Persuasion and like give us the meat here, as Alexa said.
Well, maybe in that opening scene, because we want you to describe the office, is there a picture of his mother on his desk?
Right.
And it prompts a moment of him like looking at it, and you know, there are lots of ways to kind of work that in. And then what if we found an investor? Antony looked up. Okay, who said that? Actually.
Yeah.
So connect that.
Yeah.
I mean, Anne said, the company's revenues are steady. The new deal with York Chancery is going to start generating substantial revenues in a year. It's a sound long-term investment. Kelnish just needs to be able to get back on its feet. We find an investor, pay back some of the creditors, reorganize the company, liquidate some assets. And so I'm not a company person. I'm not a business person. And this is where I go, wait, if they're insolvent, how are the revenues steady?
Right.
So you're going to have to explain this to me.
Right.
Explain it like I'm 5.
This is when I go to my husband. I'm like,
it's like,
no.
Words.
Yeah.
So that's just a note, because that doesn't make sense to me. Oh, and again, this needs a dialogue tag or action tag. I'm going to guess this is Walter. You mean for me to give up the family? Sorry.
A note here is like both of these paragraphs are just dialogue. Like they're long paragraphs, but they're just dialogue. And like we got to do some stuff in between the dialogue.
Yeah. You mean for me to give up the family business to some Silicon Valley new age tech hippie? This company has been in my family for 200 years, and which is actually really interesting here, because if this is Walter, how is it Antony's mother's company?
It can still explain it. Like, did she make it what it is? Just give us.
Yeah, something.
So.
Also, what company has been in business for 200 years? I can't think of one.
I don't know.
So that's another thing you have to consider. I don't know. Has Johnson & Johnson been in business that long? Like, think about those sorts of things. I know it's supposed to be a house, but like, think about analogs. Honestly, even a business that's been in business for 60 years is impressive, frankly, in this landscape. So, and you could have him say things like, we survived 3 recessions and whatnot, like things that are going to feel very real. You could even say like, we survived the 2008 and the COVID-19 recession.
Right.
Womp womp. 200 years of legacy and you want to flush it down the drain? Absolutely not. Unthinkable. There has to be some other way. Well, Anne said, calm and uncowed, there is. It's called bankruptcy. But again, I'm like, if the revenues are steady, why would they declare bankruptcy? I'm sure Antony or your lawyers can help you draft the news release. I'm losing Antony here.
Right.
Overall.
He's not in the scene enough. And look, the guy doesn't always have to have the idea in the scenes. Yeah. Like, it's nice, but he needs to be active in some way or have more emotions. Like if he's not participating vocally, he can be participating mentally. Like we can feel what, like, is he getting irritated? Like what is going on?
Also because we know he's Anne Elliot. So in fairness, because we know persuasion. I want to, in even greater sense, in fact, having him scoff and roll his eyes does not feel like Anne Elliot to me, by the way. That's very, and it's okay if he's a different Anne Elliot, but that's very forward. I want to have a better sense of him cowing in this scene. I want a better sense of how he fits in the business, because you're going to try to analog this to persuasion. Since it's okay if it's mostly Anne and Walter talking and rolling over him, but like make it clear that that is his function. Right. It is his function because he's Anne Elliot. So it's all just drawing it out and adding more. Yeah. I mean, you're in a position. I see this as like scaffolding. Like it's not about deleting any of this. It's just building on what's already there and is already good.
This is easier work to do. It's just
In fact, I'm about to post a video for underwriters with lots of tips. It should help. It's just so strange to me because I'm an overwriter. If it were me, you'd be like, why do you have 10 pages when you could have 2? And I'd be like, all right, so I'll finish this off. Walter seethed. Anne raised an eyebrow. A beat passed, then 2. I want a third thing. That's what Anthony is doing. Anthony just like sighed and looked at his phone or something. Right. Walter sat down. Go, Anne. The question is, Anthony said, where are we going to find an investor? Yeah. So we already kind of talked about this. So just this last bit, which I included because I liked the joke, honestly. Mitchell Croft had made his fortune by manufacturing and selling a special soap for cows. Anthony wasn't sure what the market for cow soap was exactly, but judging by the investment Mitchell's investment company, was willing to throw into Kelnich Inc., he assumed it was substantial. I liked that, so that's why
I think there was like a weird spacing issue, but I think Alexa just fixed it.
Oh yeah, it got fixed when I imported it into Google Docs, it looked like. So maybe that was just a copy pasta in Word. We won't be making any major changes, of course, Mitchell said, flipping through the company financials. Some leaning up of the operation, some tightening of the budget. Once the business takes off again, we're happy to leave it in your capable hands and take a seat as silent partners. We'd like to think of ourselves as tenants rather than business owners. Nice little wink to persuasion.
I think that this is just coming a little fast, and it's fine to like, I like starting in the middle of things, like it is but once you start in the middle of things, then we generally do a second paragraph that's like, the past 2 weeks have been absolutely bonkers, like this is everything that happened to me. So it's just like, we understand how we got from point A to point B. And I know you don't want to start the paragraph with like, so we began a search for an investor, and like that's no fun, but you can do it. You can keep this opening, just fill in the blanks for us.
Though I personally, again, because I know this is persuasion, I kind of want something after this. You don't have to, because it is punchy. I kind of want Anthony to go home. I want to see him in his home environment, unwinding. Maybe like he wouldn't have a picture of his fiance that he turned down. But like you should have something that reminds him of him, because again, persuasion readers, we expect it. We know what's going to happen. So like, give me some like little tension-y tease. Like, does he sit down and he's trying to find something to watch on Netflix to unwind from this day of all days? And does he see something that like they binge watch together? I don't know. I'm spitballing.
His favorite street food, as we mentioned already.
Yeah, street food. Yeah. So and also, does he have friends is a question. Like, I just feel like there's a beat that I want between these things, basically.
For sure.
Especially because I assume, since we're jumping straight to this, and I'm assuming Mitchell Croft is the Crofts, that means his ex is going to show up really, really soon. Right. And it's almost too soon. So.
Right. Agreed.
He smiled pleasantly at Walter and Elizabeth, who had maintained a stubborn, stoic silence throughout the meeting. Again, scene setting.
Yeah, just like, what are we doing? What are we looking at? Just and what are we feeling? Like, I know this is a retelling, but don't rely too much on that, because you'll be surprised how many people have not read these books.
Oh yeah, Jane. Like, I get people all the time who've never read Jane Eyre, and like
they don't care. So it's like you think that only people who are fans of like both Alexa and I we've done like retellings, but you would think that mostly people who like Shakespeare, who like Jane Eyre are picking up these books, but that's not true. Everyone will pick them up. So
yeah, exactly. And then you done a good job at we'll just go to the last comment because I literally just put this here because I liked the opening joke.
Right.
So yeah, same thing that we've already talked about. This is a great start. Like the voice, we're both saying it. We love the voice, the humor. I laughed more than once.
What to do? Like it's really hard to do.
I see the persuade. I mean, like I'm over here like persuasion. It's just flesh it out. Start overwriting. Don't be afraid. Just more, expand it. So that it feels a little more substantive and it flows a little more like a novel. So yeah. That is it. We did it.
We did it. Critique their work. I know that it's like so hard to like have that, but know that like we weren't gonna like Alexa wasn't gonna put something on here that like wasn't good. So you're all like,
well, honestly, I said it last time and still true. People like sent their A game. Like originally when I set out to this, I was like, oh, I'll find things and I'll just do like line edits so they can really see all the grammar. Most people weren't like, things were solid. And that's why I switched it to do more than just first pages. Cause I'm like, no, I'm going to talk about character and emotion and build up and info dumping. Cause like I got good stuff. So. And also selfishly, I picked things I was interested in reading. Yeah. All right. So Q&A time. Someone said, heck yeah. So questions about things we talked about here, questions about openings, beginnings, first pages, genre questions, because Emily knows a lot about romance and voice. We can both talk about voice. Like that's and I think that's something that comes up consistently in the samples. It's partly because I pick things with voice that I find interesting. But also voice is really important as well, especially in opening pages.
Yeah. Absolutely. You can sell a book on voice alone, honestly.
Yeah. And actually, that kind of goes to that question about grammar. Someone can overlook imperfect writing if the voice is fire. Like, honestly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Here. Brand items in books. That's a good question. Allowed to name them without mentioning. It varies. Sometimes they're just going to make you change it and copy edits, but sometimes you get to keep it. It depends.
It has never come up for us. We mentioned Starbucks and stuff. Like it's never come up.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't. Don't worry about it at this point.
Yeah.
Don't like around it, but don't worry about it.
It depends on context. Like as long as like I'm pretty sure I mentioned Kleenex in my book.
Oh yeah, people mention Kleenex. Also, you don't know this, but dumpster is a capital D dumpster. Like it is a brand, and so.
Wow, interesting. I didn't know that. Language evolves.
Yes.
As long as you're not being disparaging, I think it's fine. I have a Starbucks joke in my book. That's based on BU. So if you went to Boston University, you are the only person who will get it. It's very exciting. Let's see. Have you ever started a book and you feel like it's not worth writing? Yeah, I have. I've definitely petered out on things. Less so recently, only just because like once you're in the pipeline, you're usually, have you, since being published, started something and just petered out on it? I personally haven't.
Not started like writing, but I have outlined things and then been like, it's not.
I've done that too.
Happen. So it's like one of those, and like I've talked to other writers too that have done this, and it's like, if you really can't, there's a difference between shiny new idea syndrome where you're like, I really want to start something else, and a difference between that and like not loving what you're working on. It's okay if it's just becoming a grind and you just feel like it's not working. It's okay to put it aside, and maybe you'll return to it. Like you don't know, but.
Yeah, for me, I've had a couple, and it's more that I get stuck and I just don't know. For me, it's always plot, honestly. Like, because I'll start with a high concept, but sometimes I'll peter out, and like I know you're like, but you're a pantser. I have to at least know my midpoint turn, and if I can't figure it out, that book gets shelved until I figure out what the heck the book is.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I just have a high concept and it sits. Like
Yeah.
for my one I'm working on now, I had the idea 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, but I couldn't figure it out until last year. So it's not always forever abandoning something, but sometimes also it is forever, and that's okay too.
Yeah, it is.
We're not fantasy people, but opening a book first page with a battle scene for fantasy too cliche, maybe.
I don't know. I mean, like, I think it's a hard thing to do, especially on like a book 1. It might be better than a book 2, but it's like you want to get a sense of character. I don't think it's too cliche. I'm trying, like, especially in YA, I don't think a lot of them start in a battle scene, to be honest. So,
well, I think the tough thing is it is anytime you start an action is that if you throw people in with the characters, they don't know who they are and they don't know why they should care, and it's a balance basically. If there are seasoned fantasy readers in the chat who know the answer to this, this is a personal. I have done book signings, and I will do them again when the world is normal. I love events. So yes, I will definitely, just locationally speaking, I'll do stuff all over California, West Coast for sure. I'll end up in Atlanta again for sure. I want to go back to Boston. I want to go to New York. I'm definitely going to Maryland. So like all those areas, if those are, and really anywhere else that invites me places is the answer. I will go. Oh, Denver. I'm definitely going back to Denver. Once they're allowed to have their con again. So yay. This is a good question. Should your big for real inciting incident be in the first scene, chapter 10 pages, or do you just need a strong hook?
That's tough. So I would
depends.
I'd say, honestly, I'm going to be real with you. When you are querying, if you can get it in the first 5 or 10 pages, that's good, because agents want to see it, and it's like you're going to draw them in. Then once you're past your debut, you get a little bit more leeway. You can string things along a little bit, but it is a benefit to your query when like we wanted to make sure in the first 10 pages of our query was like a big thing.
Yeah. But so my controversial thing is, what's an inciting incident really? Because I think it can vary. Something has to happen as soon as possible. Some shift to the status quo, but you have to establish the status quo. It's a delicate dance. And in some cases, you can actually do that on a single page. In some cases, some it's a few. But also, inciting incidents can kind of stack. So in my new book, or actually, we'll use the Ivies. No spoilers, or I'll try. Technically, really, the inciting incident is when someone dies. That doesn't happen in the first 5 to 10 pages. It is not that kind of thriller. And in some, they do die right away.
Well, I would say your inciting incident is college.
Exactly. And that's the thing. I have a different, it's an inciting incident, definitely to something, but it's not technically really the inciting incident of the main action of the book, but it's sexy and it happens pretty fast. So there should be layers to the things that are happening. If you've got a really good one, but like it just doesn't make sense to throw it in the first chapter, don't throw it in the first chapter, because that could be a pacing mistake. But do something.
Yeah.
That's my helpful answer. Yes, email me. I love cons and events, and virtual makes things easy. So email me. It's hello@alexadunn.com. So, but I'm also very bad at email, so forgive me if I don't respond right away. I haven't filmed it yet, but I have a full outline. So soon, my video on underwriting, and I had it approved by Lainey, who is an underwriter, because I was like, do I know what I'm doing? She's like, yeah, I got ideas from this. I'm like, good, because I usually don't have that problem, though it varies. Are you an overwriter or an underwriter, Emily?
Well, I'm the underwriter, but that's why I have a writing partner who is the overwriter. So
that's smart.
We have a good balance where I'm like, okay, let's just get back to the plot. And he's like, no, we need feelings. So,
this is hard. How do you know? Can you explain how you know if a book has voice or not? It's like porn. Honestly, you know what's porn.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think just anything that like, do you feel the character through the prose? I would say, like, are we getting a sense of something through the prose?
Yeah, and that's the thing. There's character voice, but there's also just writing style, authorial voice, and that it's sentence structure, rhythm, word choice. I can tell you what doesn't have voice usually. The kind of stuff that I've advised against in like the amateur writing mistakes videos, like I got up, I walked across the room, I picked up a glass, I drank the water. That doesn't have voice. Those are just sentences.
Yeah.
That's not doing anything. That makes sense. Yeah. Basic is boring, essentially. Yeah. But don't do purple prose because I hate that too. Oh, this is interesting. How do you introduce the essential first chapter characters without losing the reader?
So hard, honestly. Like every time I sit down to do a first chapter, it is so hard, especially in like in contemporary and rom-com, because you usually have a bunch of characters, and it always feels so inauthentic to me to be like, my best friend Madeline came in, like she's not thinking about it's her best friend. So, like it's a debate I have every single time I write it, but you gotta have to kind of slip it in and just everyone you're not going to lose the reader. Like you feel like it's too much, but they don't.
Yeah. And also just practically think of very efficient scenes that enable you to have multiple characters in one place. This is why, like, so, I mean, I'm basic AF. Like, you don't have to do what I do. That's why I opened one book with a party and another with with lunch in the cafeteria at school. It's basic, but it works. Okay. My new one, honestly, I don't introduce all of those characters right away. I take my time. And that's okay too. It really depends on your book. So like in the first chapter, you only meet my main character and her grandmother. You don't start I start layering them in chapter 2 and 3. Yeah. And I did use lunch in the cafeteria again. Oh no.
And I will say for romance, people say like, oh, you should have the love interest in the first chapter. And I've literally never done it. So
yeah. You don't have to. Exactly. Yeah. Rules are meant to be broken.
Yeah.
And just bringing this up again with the brand thing. If you are using brands, don't say anything negative about them just to cover your butt. When in doubt, go generic and don't use brands. I will say specifically to brands, unless you are completely positive that social media thing is not going to disappear tomorrow, make up your own. Right. It's fine to reference Facebook in passing. I reference Instagram in my book.
Social, like on my channels, whatever.
But like you could also do that with brands. You can literally make things up. Like if you don't want to use Starbucks, you can make up your own chain. Right. You can make up your own bookstore. It's fine. Hold on. Say something interesting, Emily, while I read.
Oh man, I don't even know what I'm thinking about.
This is an interesting question, actually. Is there a way to view your book realistically without taking a long break from it? Like, is there a way to adequately look at it and edit it without taking the distance? And, it's a great question because often in publishing, you are not given that time. It sucks.
Yeah. I don't know that you can ever look at your book realistically. Like, you just have to, trust yourself. And for me, I guess when I think realistically, it's like, are there more things you want to do to it? And when the answer to that is no, then that's when I stop, because I don't think that you're ever going to get the distance to like feel like it's brand new again, because it's never going to be brand new to you.
Also, you're never, and without the time thing, unless you really leave it for a long time, you will always know so much more about the plot, characters, the world, you know everything. So when you read, you will fill in blanks that might not be there. You will find things interesting that might bore other people. So really, you have to give it to critique partners, essentially, and trust the people you give it to. So really, when you're on a time crunch, like in publishing, you have to trust that your agent or your editor knows what they're doing, and it's honestly hard sometimes to go, all right, do I just follow everything they told me to do, or do I have the perspective to adequately do this? And then you just do the best that you can, honestly. It sucks because sometimes you get the time. I've said it before, I'm very grateful on my second book that I got extra time. If I hadn't, I'm scared of what would have been published, honestly, because I didn't have the distance to realistically view it with short time. And even then, it was still revised very fast. Oh God, flashbacks. And then on the Ivies, it's this weird advantage that I didn't sell it fast. So I finished it, and then for personal reasons, had to take off the summer. So by the time I did an edit letter, it had been like 8 months, and that distance is critical. So sometimes you have to hope you get the time, honestly. It sucks. I'm impatient.
To be honest, in our publishing schedule, we're just like one thing to the next. So just maybe practice not getting the distance.
Yeah. All right. We do need to wrap it up because it's been 2 hours. I did it again. So long. I have a problem. It's fine. This is a question for you. Me a little, but you. And we can end on this. This is a romance question. Any helpful tips on transitioning haters to lovers realistically?
Well, honestly, I will say for our next book, the whole point of writing this book to me was like a little bit of an issue I have with enemies to lovers, which is the idea, like, I love enemies to lovers. I really do. And like, I love this problem as much as the next person, but it's so noticeable to me that generally the trope works in a way where honestly, the guy has been secretly into her from the beginning and is just being a jerk. I don't really like that so much. Like, why is he being a jerk if he likes her? So that's like my whole like guiding MO for like our book 4 is the idea that like he's not secretly into her. Like not at all secret. He's not into her at all. So I think that you just want to bear in mind that like these are people who, how much is forgivable, you know, like, and a lot is forgivable if you see change or atonement in some way, or it's forgivable because there's a misunderstanding. Want to like be realistic, and we don't want characters to end up together who have just been mean to each other for no like good reason, you know, like Pride and Prejudice is a great example. That's all founded on misunderstandings and prejudices. And so it's okay, like at the end when they get together, even though he said horrible things about her, and he's also actively changed. So you can see that we can forgive it. And another thing is like, we don't just do fighting just to do fighting. Like, you want to ground it in character. A lot of enemies to lovers has just bickering, and it's just there. It's just bickering. I mean, a lot of romance in general just has bickering. And
it doesn't work if the banter's empty.
Right.
Like I can't really ship it if I'm not really like feeling that undercurrent. Oh, yeah. No, that's true. And I also would say you have to earn the transition. This actually kind of came up with my editor this kind of goes to the other question too, with The Stars We Steal, which, I mean, the love arc went in many directions. So one of them was a hate to love arc. And my editor was like, I don't understand why these characters love each other. I don't understand why they would be drawn to each other. I don't understand why they like each other. And it was obvious to me. But again, sometimes it doesn't make it onto the page.
Right.
So really think about what are the things that connect them. It can't just be that they're hot or they exchange some cute banter. Give them something to grasp onto, a shared hobby, or it's usually not the personality because they're fighting. And you have to create moments where they can see each other in a different way, or someone's allowed to be vulnerable, you know?
And here's my $100 romance writing tip. Are you guys ready? This is like the thing that like, I think in terms of like romance, capital R romance, like it's different when you're writing sci-fi or fantasy. Like this is obviously a good thing to have in mind, but like when you're writing the genre of romance, one of the things that we always set out to do is that one of our characters has a belief about the world or love, and there's a missing piece of that equation. And the other character has the opposite piece of that, where they are going to be able to answer a question that the main character has, and the main character is going to be answer a question that the other character has. So like for an example, in our first book, our main character believes that she can never be the main character in a love story. She believes she's always going to be on the sidelines, and she thinks that love doesn't last because of it. And our love interest is able to show her that she can be the main character, and this is the example. And for him, he has to know the difference between the real thing and the fake thing. And so she shows him what the real thing is. So you want to have contrasting ideas, and then when they come together, they answer each other's questions.
Yeah, they have to each have their own growth arc.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna stop there because, as you know, I could talk for a very long time. It's a problem. Thank you for joining me. It was so fun having another person, and like you're very smart, and you said very smart things, and I'm like,
thanks for having me. It was a blast.
Listen to Emily, everyone. And definitely check out her books. I'll have you on the channel again. It's great.
Yeah.
We debuted together, and we both live in Los Angeles, though we can't see each other in person anymore. Like Emily and Austin are my writing buddies. We used to go to coffee shops together to write. So yeah. Sadness, sad face. We can't anymore. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope this was useful. If you're catching this on the rewatch, you won't see it now at the end, but you know what I mean? There are going to be timestamps down below so that you can jump to the different pages and like look at the critiques, and you can drop questions or thoughts down in the comments on the video once it's all done. And yeah, thank you so much. I hope this was helpful for everyone. And next, I'm going to do query critiques next. I need a little something different, even though there are still like 280 things that you guys sent me for first pages. Look for that call for queries a couple weeks from now. Probably gonna wait till after Thanksgiving on my community tab. Though I will try to also shout out in a video if I can that is happening. I'll figure it all out. But yeah, look at my community tab for the call for queries. And it'll be similar but faster and more because queries are short. So everyone have an amazing Friday night and weekend. Yeah. Bye, guys.
Bye.